try to help them raise that money, which they need to do. This was another event that we helped organize for Uniting for Peace. This was a day of action in New York City at the UN to basically do a demo. Roger Waters is part of this coalition as well. He's all behind Uniting for Peace and has done some really amazing, beautiful music to that effect. All these resources you would find on our website, again, which is lifelineforpalestine.com. Yeah?
Start getting some questions.
Yes, and let me just wrap right now. I've covered almost all of this. Yeah, the last thing I want to say is that in the same way that Gaza is a microcosm of empire, it's also a microcosm of the price that we pay here in our economy. And the big picture is not only endless war, it's also crushing inequality, climate and environmental collapse, rising authoritarianism and fascism. As Martin Luther King said, militarism, extreme materialism, and racism, which is inseparable from Zionism, and colonialism, those all go together. You really can't fix one without the other. That's why everybody, no matter what you think about Gaza and Palestine, that's why everybody is in the target here. Because if we let this continue, it's at our peril. It's at our public dollars and our public resources. This is why we don't have the money for public education. Higher education should be free. When I grew up, it was. You know, it's outrageous what people have to pay in order to get educated and then come out with a debt. And then you have to worry, can you get a job? Because AI is going strong and displacing lots of jobs. Our policies are not being run for the people. They are being run for investors and for, for lobbyists, for AIPAC, for the war contractors, for big pharma and the medical appliance industry. You know, this democracy is a democracy in name only. And that's where I want to just skip to the final slides here. As Frederick Douglass said, power concedes nothing without a demand. It never did and it never will. That's why we have to keep doing what we're doing. It doesn't fix itself. Alice Walker again is saying, but the biggest way people give up power is by not knowing we have it to start with. Remember, we have the power, we have the numbers. We changed public opinion. And as Malcolm X said, we're not outnumbered, we're just out-organized. This is about getting organized. That's what you are doing here with Students for Justice in Palestine. It's all about getting organized. And go to Lifeline for Palestine to help some of the cross-linking among our different organizing between labor and students and everyday people. When we all get together as humanity, we are absolutely unstoppable in standing up to make this a world that works for all of us. So thank you all so very much, and give yourselves a round of applause for all of you.
Okay, we're going to open the floor to questions. So does anyone have anything that they would like to ask? Okay, you can just call on people.
Sure, okay, great. So, we have a question right here.
You want me to stand up?
Yeah, please.
First of all, thank you for coming and for offering your time. But I did want to ask. So, of course, with imperialism and colonial projects, profit is the main incentive for such actions. But with actions such as like general strikes and other labor movements, that's very effective at targeting that. However, capital is so entrenched right now that they can't accept a day or 2 days worth of profit loss. So how do we sustain these general strikes? What sort of actions do we have to take as a broader community to help sustain these strikes long enough for that to be unignorable?
Beautiful. Okay, really important question. I'm going to repeat that just so it can go out on the live stream here too. The point was that when you have a strike for a day or 2 days, it really gets at the profits of the economic behemoths and the capitalist system. And the system doesn't like that. You know, witness the $75,000 fine that the labor union had to pay for a one-day strike. So how do we sustain this? That is, you know, that's a really key question. Let me say there are some things we can do right away, like by contributing to strike funds so that the dollars are there. Pressuring the unions, because the unions themselves have strike funds, to be able to pay the substitute wages, because it's also very hard on workers, but you also get hit with fines. So they have the dollars to do that, and that's why our pressing the AFL-CIO to stand up here and do the right thing would be a really important step forward. If you look at like what happened, you know, John Kennedy had a famous saying that if you make peaceful revolution impossible, you make violent revolution inevitable. So you can only control it so much to where people just have to stand up and fight back. You know, on housing right now, for example, half of all Americans are struggling to keep a roof over their heads. We now have, what is it, 42 million people who are going without food now, who've lost their food stamps, their SNAP. You know, things are just getting to a boiling point to where this becomes, you know, it just hits a certain kind of ignition. And our job, I think, is to help bring that pressure to bear in as peaceful a way as possible and to help sustain it by doing things like helping the labor unions mobilize, helping them raise strike funds is really critical. And I think by our being multidimensional and intersectional really helps too, because the system relies on us being divided and conquered. They want climate people in that corner, you know, and they want housing people in that corner, and then they want anti-genocide people in that corner. And the more we can work together, the better. You know, I myself used to work, you know, I started off as a healthcare provider, and then started going upstream to policies, because it's really a tragedy to see people sick for reasons that could have been prevented, like had they had decent housing, or a good job, or clean air to breathe, or healthy food to eat, you know, and their water wasn't polluted with lead or a gazillion other things. So I went into the policy world, and then I discovered in the policy world that it's the lobbyists and the economic bigwigs who are dictating the system because our politics is bought and paid for. So I moved from clinical medicine to political medicine, meaning working on the political system. And I invite people to think big, you know, and don't stay in a box just because you're being told that you are powerless and that resistance is futile. It's not futile. They want you to think it's futile because they are quaking in their boots that we should stand up and start acting with the power that we actually have. Thank you for the question. Okay, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I've been a big supporter of yours for a long time, and I especially appreciate, I mean, I think the two big issues for me that made it impossible for me to support the Democratic Party in the last election was, one was the genocide, and the other was the omnicidal threat of nuclear war with Russia. And you, unlike any Democrat politician in Congress, including Bernie and AOC, were on the right side of that in opposing the threat of nuclear war with Russia, which would kill everyone. It would be about imperialism, and he's even supported us ultimately the Trump's war on Venezuela. The threats of they bombed 17 boatloads of civilians now, trying to start a war with Venezuela, saying it's about drugs, but it's really about oil. Trump said he wanted to steal the oil. And Mamdani has said, well, he's a dictator too, just like all the other Democrats, which ultimately is the CIA talking point. We should have war with Venezuela for the dictator, and when he was elected. And so I'm wondering what your thoughts are about all of this, and like, is Mamdani potentially leading us down a road when we should be listening to someone like you or Kashama Sawan?
Thank you for the question, and very well said. He's obviously better than any of the other candidates that he was running against. And one thing New York has done, thanks to Cuomo and the Democrats, was destroy alternative parties and their ability to contest for elections. So he's basically, Cuomo eliminated, and the Democrats eliminated independent parties in New York, which was really a tragedy. Mamdani benefited from public funding of elections, which the Democrats and Republicans have also sought to destroy so that corporations could control candidates. He also benefited from ranked choice voting, which gets rid of the spoiler effect. There is no spoiler effect under ranked choice voting. We can go into that if you want to, but just accepting that at face value, that's really important so people can actually vote for what they want, not against who they hate. Because if you're just voting against what you hate, it doesn't move you forward in a rational way to where you want to go. So just wanted to point out that the system is toxic, and I can only go so far myself with people who I like, but they don't critique the toxic system. And as some of us say often, you can't have a revolution in a counter-revolutionary party. And while he won in New York, and that was fabulous, and it was great to see, that was a win for the people of New York, the two other big wins that day were for former intelligence officers who worked for the military that won 2 governor races in Virginia and New Jersey. So it's clear where the power still lies in the Democratic Party. The campaign contributions are completely off the charts. The party is more bought and paid for. It's not critiquing its billionaire donors. You have Bernie and AOC going on their anti-oligarch tour, but they're not talking about the oligarch that controls the Democratic Party, the oligarchy that controls the Democratic Party, and the fact that the Democratic Party, it needs to reform itself if it's going to actually end the genocide or stand up against militarism and nuclear weapons. They don't do that, and that's as threatening to every one of us as anything else. And it's not only with Russia, it's also with China. Attacking Venezuela is going to really amplify those tensions because China is very involved with Venezuela and will feel compelled to do who knows what. But we're playing this horrible, dangerous game of brinksmanship right now. And no one is minding the store, not the Democrats and not the Republicans. So I agree with you. Personally, I'm all for supporting Mamdani's domestic agenda, but he's not going to fix our larger situation. And it's not reason to stop the fight for independent politics. We're not getting out of here alive so long as the oligarchs are calling the shots in our political parties. Thank you. Other comments? Yeah, here.
This is less of a specific question and more of just like a plea in general. I feel like, well, a plea for recognition. I think a lot of my peers can empathize with me that it's really, really hard to constantly be monitoring the news and be receiving this intake of footage of like watching. I mean, it's harder for the people enduring it, but watching a live stream genocide and murder and torture and reading books on how systemically based this is and how like hypocritical Israel has been historically since its existence and prior to that. And I think I'm not one of the organizers of this event, but I've seen how hard they've worked individually, and I think in general it's like hard to outweigh the balance of negativity with just how hard everything is and deep rooted all of our issues are, and so just I was wondering, I guess just like in support of the
wonderful question, and thanks for making that point, because it is, it's really daunting when you look at this crisis full in the face. I mean, just to look at the genocide alone is really wrenching and heartbreaking, and to work on it is really hard, and you know, just is an experience of misery on a daily basis. I would say, though, that what I'm witnessing, as someone who's kind of, I grew up during the Vietnam War, which was, you know, the genocide of a couple million people in Southeast Asia, especially in Vietnam, you know, and it was really horrible. And I sort of got radicalized then, and there were shootings against students at Kent State. I don't know if you remember that, but I really became an activist watching that. And then over the years, you can't, like, it gets really hard to not see it. And I feel like more and more people are seeing it, you know, just in the way that public opinion changed about the genocide. People are seeing it, they're also seeing the struggle in their own lives, the struggle for jobs, the struggle with student debt, and healthcare, and housing. And it gets to a point where it becomes a real positive and a real inspiration to find a community of resistance, and a community that affirms our humanity, and a community that affirms our values and what it is that we're working towards, especially when you can get past the propaganda and you see that, oh my God, if we just cut back on these crazy military expenditures, we have all the money we need for healthcare, for free higher education, for social housing, for rent control. We could actually create a world that works for all of us. And that's what I find really positive about working actually on political campaigns, because that's when you really get to talk to the public about how to do this right and how to fix it. You can't run a campaign talking about what's broken. You can begin with what's broken, but you gotta move very quickly to how we actually can fix this in a way that makes it a healthier, more just, and sustainable place for everybody. And I would just keep holding up that vision of how this actually can work, and what a sustaining thing that is when we can start to see not only the crisis we're in, but the solution, and that the solution is closer at hand than it's ever been, because people are more mobilized. They are not buying into the two-party propaganda anymore, you know, and even the Trump movement, you know, is really crashing right now. At 100 days, Trump was the most unpopular American president in history. You didn't hear that very much from the media, but that was true, and they rattle on about, you know, about immigrants and people of color and LGBTQ, and really are extremely anti-humane and racist and vicious. And they pretend that that's normal. Well, it's not normal. It's not normal, and it's not approved. It's highly disapproved now by the American public, more and more. And so there really is a strong momentum among public opinion now to do the right thing. And so many people were in fear of standing up, and I think the reasons to be afraid get smaller all the time as we see that kind of the forces of darkness are being marginalized. They're really being rejected by the wider American public. So that's another victory, I think, that we who are speaking out for humanity are winning together. Thank you for the question. Yeah, back there.
Good evening, Dr.
Hi.
Welcome to Arkansas. My question tonight surrounds the concept of America first. My question to you is, I agree with you that Israel's committing a genocide in Gaza. I'm a 20-year-old MAGA Republican, and I'm among a growing number of young Republicans that see the influence of the Israeli lobby and just big money in politics in general. My question to you is, how do you balance messaging your legitimate position on Gaza with the issues that face Americans, especially Gen Z Americans, like rising housing prices, inflation, and stagnating wages?
Great question, and I think I'm in agreement on that. That, you know, Gaza is kind of a symbol of what our military policy is. And I feel like we have an Israel first policy instead of an American people first. It should be an America first policy. You know, that may have different implications to different people, but if it's about working people and it's about decent wages and health care and air that doesn't make us sick, you know, I think that's not like a red or a blue issue. I have problems with both of those parties because the traditional, you know, leadership of those parties is taking big money and they're taking their marching orders from corporations. So I kind of agree with Ralph Nader on this, that there's the potential for a lot of what's traditionally been considered right-left. I don't see it as right-left, I see it as top-bottom. You know, we need to be a bottom-up democracy that actually respects our civil liberties and our civil rights, you know, and that's another way in which the Trump wing has really violated the basic tenets of America First. So thank you for that question. I think there's a lot of common ground here.
Would you vote for Tucker Carlson in 2028?
I wouldn't rule it out, put it that way. There are many things that I'm really enjoying about what he's doing right now. Okay, let's see, up close here.
Hi, thank you for speaking. Do you think that we can apply the same organizational and divestment strategies to the United Arab Emirates, given their support of the RSF atrocities that are being committed in Sudan?
Thank you for raising that question and raising that issue, because the genocide going on in Sudan now is absolutely jaw-dropping. And I don't think we can do justice in Palestine without also doing justice in Sudan. And I admit I have been so deep in the weeds in Gaza that I'm not altogether well informed, but that's my understanding, what you just expressed, that the UAE is a major driver here and needs to be held to account. And absolutely, the US needs to use its influence on UAE, even if that meant, you know, in my view, the military-industrial complex should not be driving our foreign policies, and it is. We're all about the sale of weapons, basically, and the conduct of war. And we're not going to get out of here alive as long as that's the case. I think we need a foreign policy that puts the American people first, that puts our humanity and our moral values first, not weapons and endless war. Thank you for the point. All right, we got a bunch of questions. All right, one more question. Let's see. This one right here, yeah.
I was wondering, what do you think is the best approach to getting moderates and conservatives to break through propaganda? And these are people who oftentimes don't want to even begin to listen in the first place.
Yeah. It's very hard to do. There's a kind of a guideline when you're organizing, is that you don't want to spend your time talking to people who already agree with you, and you don't want to spend your time talking to people who are diametrically opposed to you, because you can talk to you, you're blue in the face, and you can do that for years on end and you're not going to bud. What you really want to talk to are the people who already agree with you, which by all measures now is the vast majority of the American public, who wants health care, who wants to end the genocide, who wants good wages at jobs, who don't want their jobs displaced by AI, you know, who want affordable housing. But they're not aware that there is a politics of integrity out there. They're so accustomed to being thrown under the bus. This is where grassroots organizing and door-to-door and events in your neighborhood, in your community, that begins to develop common cause with other communities that are not active politically. If you take the people who are not active, it's about as big as the Democrats or the Republicans. There's another constituency which is equally large that could completely change the political landscape if we build community with them. So I usually advise people not to worry, and don't waste your breath. You can make the argument once, and don't worry about doing it thereafter. They'll learn soon enough, really from the school of hard knocks, which is where most people, are getting their big wake-up call right now. And that school of hard knocks is going gangbusters. So lots of people are having their wake-up moment right now, so it's a very good time, to be engaged, to be working with Students for Justice in Palestine, or with, what is it called, 0 Hour, or the other groups here on campus that are doing this work, working on housing, for example. I think it's your joint project right now that really speaks to people's, deep economic needs, and it crosses the Republican, the right, left, red, blue, everything, borders. I think there's enormous reason to be, I wouldn't say hopeful, I'd say more than hopeful, to feel powerful, that we actually have power and we have the means of realizing it now. And for those who want to do, cross-link our organizing across various movements, again, I just want to throw out lifelineforpalestine.com, where we try to bring many of these efforts, particularly around Palestine, because if we can solve the Palestine problem, then we can go on to solve the, the Sudan problem and the problem of the military, which is devouring our democracy as well as any shred of economic security here at home. So thank you all so much. It's really been a pleasure speaking with you.